for messy speech.
Something you just said a moment ago is I want to make sure the audience understands that what Lee is literally saying, I think, is that what we call the canon of Supreme Court precedent on the First Amendment really is a post-1960s phenomenon.
Big
right?
time.
Right. And so
Post
people don't
1970s. It's really the civil rights
don't
era,
understand that for the first 200 some odd years, of our country, none of this stuff came up other than what Lee told you earlier about United States versus Schenck handing out stuff or calling someone a fascist. Those were big time cases, but they were the only cases the Supreme Court pretty much, and I would argue, because they actually recognized what you tried to say earlier about a certain elegance, that if you want to call a cop a fascist, then go write an op-ed in the paper, read a book. What's wrong with you? You're such a barbarian. This is not why we went. We did not go to war against King George III. So you can be a barbarian and utter words that will inspire him to retaliate against you. They're called fighting words, right? So I'm just saying that you're right. The precedent that we see today is a post-1960s, 1970s, where to be able to say to a cop, you're a pig, right? Or to scream at someone is much more permissive in a way that I don't think that's why I teed you up with what would the founding fathers think of Minneapolis, because they might go, do these people read books? For God's sakes, what are they doing?
I think they'd be more appalled by the abuse of state power thing. I'm not going to give you that one. I don't think they'd really bristle at the idea that our politics is messy and nasty. Their politics were messy and nasty.
All right, let's talk.
I think what's missing in this dialogue is who's the arbiter, Thane? Sure, let's agree that in a perfect world, everybody is genteel and we, speak to each other nicely. And then if you cross the line, you slap someone with leather gloves and challenge them to a duel, right? That's the common law tradition we came from. But right now we have a First Amendment. And that First Amendment says Congress can't abridge our freedom, or government can't abridge our freedom of speech. Who's going to decide? Are you going to decide, Thane, what's genteel and what's not?
Well, all right, but I'm going to ask you something, because we mentioned a moment ago, there's speech and there's conduct, and you can speak through your conduct. So again, we are a permissive country. So neo-Nazis can march in a town of Holocaust survivors. We know that. You can burn crosses on African-American lawns as long as it doesn't represent a true threat on Virginia versus Black. Things that you could never do in Europe, we can do here, right? We have much more permissiveness. You can burn a flag, all right? But one question I would ask when I look at Minneapolis, I go, oh, wait a minute. I can burn a flag, I can burn a cross, and I can march on Holocaust survivors, but I can't move a planter into the middle of the road to block ICE. Is that a manner of my speech? Am I expressing my speech by saying I don't recognize ICE as a lawful authority? I am an American citizen. I don't like what this is happening here. And I'm going to obstruct their movement. I'm going to pull a very heavy planter, they're called street planters, right in the middle of the street. I'm going to make it impossible for ICE to navigate.
Yeah, that's not protected. And I don't know anybody that would credibly say it was. There's a pretty bright line distinction between things you do with your words or written words, right? Whether you do it with your mouth or you have it on a sign, versus actually taking physical action, which is why, by the way, I think one of the contested questions, in this moment in Minneapolis, which of course we really have to grapple with, is what is interference with a law enforcement activity, right? Excellent. Is it how close you are? Is it how loud you are? Is it what you say, right? And by the way, I think it's worth unpacking that, because people do have rights to observe government agents engaged in their duties in public, full stop. That, again, I will die on this hill. That's the core of the First Amendment. Taking out your phone to record an ICE officer or record a law enforcement agent doing their job in public on a public street where you have a right to be, fully protected by the First Amendment, and every court has said that. So the question is, when isn't it protected, and why are we seeing on screens, right, and videos and social media, situations where at least I, as a First Amendment attorney, think, when I give Know Your Rights training, I tell people that's protected activity. But now we have, for example, Kristi Noem calling it doxing, Stephen Miller calling it domestic terror, and Gregory Bovino, who I think what's his term, I don't even know his Border Patrol guy, before he was reassigned, saying You can't call agents nasty names. And if you're calling an agent something like the Gestapo, there will be consequences,
All right. Well,
referring to
okay.
the
So
deaths of
that's ridiculous.
observers.
I
Yeah,
agree. That's ridiculous. But can we go back? We're doing
sure.
this a little out of order, but I can't resist because you brought up cameras. When we think of cameras normally, we think of like movies or television where there's a guy wearing a press hat that says press on
Right,
it, or
right.
a thing that says press. And he is running around with a camera and he's got a press vest, and they're there. They're in wartime. They're always there, scene of the crime.
Yes.
Now we're living in a very strange time where everyone has a really good camera, probably
Yeah.
better than the press, and it's on their phone. And so I'm saying, yes, it's one thing to say you can't call someone a name, but is there an argument to say that if free speech absolutists and activists say you have the right under the First Amendment to observe, and thousands of you should run around with your cameras and get in the way of law enforcement officers trying to do their job? Because I'm saying, I don't know what would have happened if, I don't know, maybe you know historically, if people were following around the press, but they're not wearing a press hat and they had their own cool camera, would the police let them get that close historically in protest? Would you go, you know what, you're not a member of the press. What are you doing here? And you would say, I heard Rowland say, you got a good camera. What the hell? Observe.
Yeah.
Is there a plausible argument to be made? We're trying to do a job. We can't have 1,000 people running around with their cameras and getting in our way. Now, because I'm saying this may come up. This might become the argument that the government will make.
Of course. And my answer is no. And there's no distinction. I mean, if you're interfering with an arrest, right? If the law enforcement claim is you're interfering with an arrest, that's a factual statement and it doesn't depend on your identity. You're not interfering with an arrest anymore because you got a press badge on or not. And by the way, I just want to say, I know we're making the distinction and we should. This is a rich convo, but there are plenty of members of the press who have also been pepper sprayed, gassed, assaulted, and by the way, have claimed that they've been targeted and that law enforcement have seen them and knowingly attacked them with their press credentials.
I'm not saying that they would
So
respect the press member
it's
anymore.
unfortunately it's not a kind of mantle of
just
safety
saying,
necessarily. But I think the answer is no, Thane. That
okay. Right.
and in a couple of ways. Number one, we want our government, while doing its job in public, to be accountable to the public. And I think that irrespective of politics, whether you're pro-ICE or anti-ICE, you have every right to be out there saying, this is my government in action, and this is what I voted for, or, oh my God, we've got to stop this, right? So the core of a First Amendment, and it really is a liberty, right? I'm a civil libertarian. I think of it as a liberty more than a right. That liberty, as you rightly pointed out, it's a restraint on the government. It's not a special right for a member of the
It's
press.
not an entitlement.
It's not a special right for me because I'm a lawyer, right? It is designed to keep the government from engaging in actions or policies that diminish our ability to have a public discourse and to speak truth to power. That's what the nut of that First Amendment
Let's take a look at some